They said cowboys could never be trusted, yet one saved me. My heart belongs to him forever. She had heard the warning her whole life. People said it casually, sometimes as advice and sometimes as a joke, but the meaning was always serious. Cowboys could never be trusted. They lived freely, followed their own rules, and never stayed long enough to build something real. Her mother used to say it while shaking her head. Her friends repeated it with knowing looks. Over time, the words settled deep inside her, becoming something she believed without questioning. Because of that belief, she grew up careful. She trusted slowly and loved even more slowly. Life had already taught her enough lessons about disappointment, so she learned to protect her heart. She focused on work, responsibilities, and staying independent. Depending on someone else felt risky, and trusting the wrong person felt dangerous. When the opportunity came to work in a small rural town for a few months, she accepted it without much thought. It was supposed to be temporary, a quiet place, far from noise, drama, and complicated people. She told herself it would be easy, do the job, save some money, and leave. She did not plan to build connections or memories, especially not with the locals. The town greeted her with wide open land, dusty roads, and long silent evenings. Everything felt slower there. People greeted each other by name, and everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. She rented a small place near the edge of town, surrounded by fields and distant hills. It was peaceful but also lonely. At night, the quiet felt heavy, like it pressed against her thoughts. On her first few days, she noticed them, the cowboys. Men on horses, wearing hats, boots covered in dust, moving with confidence like they belonged to the land itself. Every time she saw one, the old warnings echoed in her mind. She avoided eye contact and kept her distance. She reminded herself why she was there and how soon she would leave. One evening, after a long and tiring day, she decided to drive back just before sunset. The sky was painted in soft orange and pink, and the road ahead was nearly empty. She felt calm for the first time since arriving. That calm did not last long. Her car suddenly made a strange sound and slowed down. She pressed the pedal, but nothing happened. Panic rose in her chest as the car came to a stop on the side of the road. She tried again, but it was useless. She sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, her heart beating fast. Her phone had weak signal. The sun was sinking lower and the road remained quiet. She had no idea what to do. She had never dealt with car trouble alone before, and the thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. Then she heard it, the slow sound of hooves against the ground. Her stomach tightened. She looked in the side mirror and saw a man on horseback approaching, a cowboy. Just like the one she had been warned about. Tall, broad shoulders, hat pulled low, moving with ease like he had done this his whole life. Her first instinct was fear. She locked the car doors without thinking, her mind filled with all the stories she had heard. She told herself to stay alert, to be careful. The horse stopped a few steps away. The man did not rush toward her. He stayed where he was, giving her space. He raised his hand slightly, a simple gesture meant to show he was not a threat. "Looks like you're having trouble," he said calmly. His voice surprised her. It was steady and gentle, not rough or careless like she expected. She did not answer right away. Her silence made him step back a little more. "I can take a look if you want," he added. "No pressure." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse and wait for help, but another part knew waiting could take hours. The road was empty, the sun was almost gone, and she felt small and alone. Slowly, she unlocked the door and stepped out, keeping a safe distance. "The car just stopped," she said quietly. "I don't know why." He nodded, listening carefully. He tied the horse to a nearby post and approached the car, moving slowly so she would not feel uncomfortable. He checked under the hood, his movements confident but unhurried. After a few minutes, he explained the problem in simple words. Something small but important had overheated. He told her it could be fixed enough to get her back to town. She watched him work, surprised by how focused and respectful he was. He did not ask personal questions. He did not make jokes or comments that made her uneasy. He simply did what needed to be done. When he finished, he stepped back and wiped his hands. "It should run now," he said. "Drive slow." Relief washed over her. "Thank you," she said, meaning it more than she expected. He nodded once. "You're welcome, be safe." That was it. No demand, no expectation, no lingering. He untied his horse and prepared to leave. As she got into her car, she realized something strange. She felt calm around him. The fear she had expected never fully came. Instead, there was a quiet sense of safety she could not explain. She drove back to town, her mind replaying the encounter. She told herself it was nothing, just someone doing the right thing. Still, the image of him standing on that quiet road stayed with her. Over the next few days, she tried to forget about it. She returned to her routine, keeping to herself. But small reminders appeared everywhere. People mentioned him casually in conversation. She heard his name at the store, at work, in passing. Each time she felt a strange curiosity rise inside her. She pushed it away, reminding herself of the rules she lived by. Cowboys were not people you trusted. They were not part of her future. One afternoon, she saw him again from a distance. He was helping an older man load supplies, laughing softly at something said. There was nothing loud or careless about him. He worked patiently, offering help without being asked. She looked away quickly, annoyed at herself for noticing. That night, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling. She told herself not to overthink a simple act of kindness. Still, a quiet question formed in her mind, one she did not want to ask. What if the stories were wrong? She had told herself not to notice him, but she couldn't help it. The cowboy who had appeared on that quiet road had started to occupy a corner of her thoughts. There was something in the way he moved, in the calm patience in his eyes, that was different from the stories she had grown up hearing. People had said cowboys were reckless, untrustworthy, and unreliable, but he was none of those things. And slowly, day by day, she began to realize that first impression might have been just the beginning. At first, their interactions were accidental. She saw him in town sometimes, carrying supplies, helping neighbors, or just riding past on his horse. Each time he noticed her and she noticed him, but there was no pressure, no insistence, no forceful attempts to get close. It was simply a presence, a quiet, steady one, that made her feel something unfamiliar, curiosity, and even a small spark of comfort. She remembered one morning in particular. She had overslept and rushed out the door, coffee in one hand and papers in the other. As she crossed the street, juggling everything, a stack of wooden crates toppled toward her. She froze for a second, unsure what to do, and then a strong hand caught the crates before they fell. She looked up, heart racing, and there he was, the same cowboy, calm and steady as ever. "You're lucky I was passing by," he said quietly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you," she said, cheeks flushed. I didn't see them coming down." "No harm done," he replied. "Just be careful next time." It was so simple, so unremarkable in words, yet it stayed with her. He didn't linger, didn't try to make her feel embarrassed, didn't ask for anything in return. He simply helped. That small act made her think about him differently. Maybe the warnings she had believed all her life were not entirely true. Maybe, just maybe, not every cowboy fit the reckless, unreliable stereotype she had been told about. As the days passed, their encounters became more frequent, though always casual. Sometimes he would be at the market, helping a local farmer carry produce. Other times, he was fixing a fence or guiding a lost horse back to its owner. She began to notice the way he interacted with people. There was patience in his voice, care in his actions, and respect in the way he treated everyone, regardless of age or status. One evening, as the sun was setting and painting the fields in gold and pink, she found herself at the edge of town, walking along a quiet path she had started to explore. He was there, leaning against a fence, watching over a herd of cattle. She froze for a moment, unsure whether to speak or turn around, but he noticed her immediately and raised a hand in greeting. "Good evening," he said, his voice low but warm. "Good evening," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. She wasn't sure why she felt nervous, but she did. "Beautiful evening," he said, glancing at the sky. "Perfect for a walk," she nodded. "It is." For a few moments they stood in silence, watching the sun sink behind the hills. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that didn't feel awkward but rather comforting. She realized she had been holding her breath without even knowing it. The calmness in his presence was like a quiet anchor in a world that often felt rushed and overwhelming. Over time, she began to notice other things about him, small details that revealed more than words ever could. The way he always tipped his hat politely to everyone he passed. The way he helped younger kids learn how to ride safely. The way he never complained about the hard work of the day, even when the sun was blazing and the tasks seemed endless. Each detail chipped away at the image she had held in her mind for so long. He was not reckless, not careless, and certainly not untrustworthy. Yet despite her growing admiration, she kept her distance. Trust did not come easily to her. Life had taught her to protect her heart, and she was not about to risk it, no matter how kind and steady he seemed. She reminded herself constantly, this was temporary. She was here for a few months, and then she would leave. She could admire from afar, she told herself, but she could not allow herself to fall into feelings she might have to abandon. Even with her careful walls, there were moments she couldn't ignore. One rainy afternoon, she had slipped while trying to cross a muddy path near the fields. She almost fell into the water channel, her heart racing with fear. But he appeared, as if he had sensed her trouble, and caught her arm before she could fall. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady but his eyes full of concern. Yes, thank you," she stammered, gripping his arm as if letting go might make the moment disappear. "Careful," he said softly. "This path can be tricky when it rains." She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. The fear and hesitation melted, replaced by a small, undeniable trust. In that moment, she realized that trust could grow slowly, quietly, without grand gestures or promises. It could grow through simple acts of care, through someone consistently showing up when it mattered most. As the weeks went by, they started speaking more. Not about deep personal secrets, but small, everyday things. She told him about the town, her work, and the little annoyances that came with adjusting to a new place. He shared stories about the land, the cattle, and the challenges of life as a cowboy. They laughed quietly together over shared experiences and small mistakes. The conversations were simple, yet they built a connection that neither had expected. She began to see that behind the rugged exterior, he had his own story, a life that wasn't perfect but shaped him into someone dependable and kind. She noticed the quiet sacrifices he made daily, the effort to care for others even when no one was watching. It made her reflect on her own life, the judgments she had carried, and the assumptions she had made without knowing the truth. One evening, after a long day of work, she found herself sitting on a fence near the fields, watching him work with the cattle. He noticed her and walked over. "Long day?" he asked. "Yes," she said with a small smile, "but it's peaceful here." "It is," he agreed. "There's something about working with the land and animals that keeps things simple, even when life gets complicated." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand that now. I've been so focused on what people said about life here, I forgot to see it for myself." He smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. "People talk a lot. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. But the truth is often found in experience, not in stories." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. It was simple advice, yet it felt profound. She realized she had been judging him before truly knowing him, just as she had been taught to judge all cowboys. And now she felt the first real stirrings of trust, fragile yet undeniable. Days turned into weeks. She found herself looking forward to small encounters, passing him on the road, hearing his voice at the market, seeing his quiet acts of kindness. Every moment built a pattern, a quiet reassurance that not all the warnings she had carried were true. He was reliable. He was kind. And slowly, she was learning that perhaps her heart could begin to trust again. She still kept her distance, reminding herself that she was only temporary in this town. But she could not deny the growing warmth in her chest, the strange comfort that came from knowing he was nearby. In her quietest moments, she began to hope that maybe, just maybe, the warnings she had been given all her life were not absolute truths. Trust, she realized, was not about the label someone carried or the assumptions of others. It was about the actions they took, the consistency they showed, and the care they gave when it mattered most. And in this cowboy, she was beginning to see all of that unfold, slowly, gently, and undeniably. As the sun set one evening, painting the fields in soft golden light, she watched him guide a horse back to the barn. He looked up and caught her gaze. For a moment, something passed between them, an unspoken understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of connection. She looked away, heart racing, and reminded herself to be cautious. But she could not deny the truth forming quietly inside her. He was different, and he was someone she could begin to believe in. And so, each day became a small step forward. A conversation here, a shared moment there, and a growing awareness that sometimes people defy expectations. Sometimes the warnings and stories we hear are not the whole truth. And sometimes the person who surprises you the most is the one who quietly earns your trust, piece by piece, moment by moment, until your heart begins to follow, even if you never expected it to. Life in the small town continued quietly for a few weeks, with each day blending into the next. She had started to settle into a routine, but a quiet tension always lingered beneath the surface of her calm. She couldn't deny that her thoughts often wandered to him, the cowboy who had appeared so calmly in her life, the one who seemed so reliable and steady. Every small interaction, every shared glance or kind word, had chipped away at the careful walls she had built around her heart. She reminded herself constantly to be cautious. She could not afford to become attached. She had learned too many lessons about trust and disappointment to fall too quickly. But life, as it often does, has a way of testing those boundaries when you least expect it. It happened one Friday afternoon. She had been working late at the small office where she had taken the temporary job, finishing paperwork that seemed to never end. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets, and she was looking forward to going home. As she packed her things and stepped outside, she noticed the clouds gathering overhead. A storm was coming, faster than she had anticipated. She hurried toward her car, hoping to beat the rain. The first drops were light, barely noticeable, but within minutes, the sky opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, drenching the streets, the fields, and her as she ran. Her car, parked a few blocks away, was not easy to reach in the storm. As she rushed, her foot slipped on the slick road and she stumbled, falling hard onto the wet ground. The rain soaked her through and she felt a sharp pain in her ankle. Panic rose immediately. She was alone, wet and hurt, and the storm made it nearly impossible for anyone to notice her or come to help. Her heart pounded. She tried to stand, but the pain in her ankle made it impossible. Tears stung her eyes, not from the fall, but from the sudden realization that she was vulnerable, completely exposed in a world she had always believed she could navigate on her own. She had worked so hard to stay independent, to protect herself from disappointment, and yet here she was, helpless in the rain. Then, as if by fate, she saw him. The cowboy appeared almost out of nowhere, riding toward her on his horse. The storm did not seem to slow him down. He was calm and focused, moving with a confidence that contrasted sharply with her fear. He reached her quickly, dismounting and moving toward her with steady hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked, concern clear in his voice. I think so, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. My ankle. He gently helped her to a nearby fence, steadying her as she tried to sit. You need to get out of this rain before it gets worse, he said. Can you walk with me? She hesitated. Pride and caution warred inside her. She was used to doing things on her own. She was used to handling emergencies herself. But the pain in her ankle and the pouring rain made her realize she had no choice. Slowly, carefully, she allowed him to support her as they walked toward her car. The ride back to town was quiet. The rain fell heavily around them, and she was grateful for the warmth and safety his presence provided. He didn't speak much, but she didn't need words. Every small gesture, the way he adjusted her posture to prevent further pain, the way he shielded her from the worst of the wind with his coat, showed her a level of care she had rarely experienced before. Once she was safely inside her apartment, he knelt to inspect her ankle. It looks like a mild sprain, he said calmly. You should keep it elevated and try not to put too much weight on it. Thank you, she whispered. The words felt small compared to the relief and gratitude swelling inside her. I'll check back tomorrow, he said. Just to make sure you're okay. She nodded, feeling something stir in her chest she could not quite name. Relief, trust, gratitude, and something else. Something stronger than she had allowed herself to feel in a long time. That night, as she rested with her ankle elevated, she replayed the events in her mind. She realized, for the first time, that trust could grow quickly when someone showed up at the exact moment it was needed most. She had always believed trust was fragile, something earned slowly over years. But she saw now that it could also be tested and proven in a single, critical moment. And in that moment, he had shown her that he could be relied upon, that he could be trusted to act with care and responsibility when it truly mattered. The following day, true to his word, he returned. He brought a small ice pack for her ankle and helped her manage the swelling. They talked quietly while he worked, sharing stories of simpler moments, life on the ranch, memories of growing up near the land, lessons learned from hard work and responsibility. He never pressed for personal details, never tried to overstep boundaries. It was clear he respected her space while still offering support. Over the next few days, as her ankle healed, she began to realize that the incident had changed something between them. Their connection, already growing slowly through casual encounters and small gestures, had deepened. She began to see him not just as a kind stranger or helpful cowboy, but as someone she could rely on emotionally, someone whose presence brought her comfort and stability. Yet even as her trust grew, fear lingered. She remembered all the warnings, all the stories she had been told about cowboys and their unpredictable nature. She reminded herself constantly to stay cautious. Her past had taught her that even the kindest people could disappoint, and she wasn't ready to risk heartbreak. But she couldn't ignore the way her heart responded to him, the subtle relief she felt in his presence, the small flutter of hope when he smiled at her, the quiet sense of safety that had become her new normal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the town bathed in soft golden light, they found themselves walking together along a familiar path. She had insisted she could manage on her own, but he had offered to accompany her, and she had agreed. Words were sparse but comfortable. They didn't need conversation to fill the silence. The companionship was enough. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked quietly, glancing at him. He shook his head slowly. "Sometimes, but this is home. It's where people need me and it's where I belong." She nodded, understanding in a way she hadn't expected. His life wasn't perfect, but it was grounded. There was responsibility, care, and a sense of duty, not the recklessness she had been warned about. She realized she admired that about him. It was rare to find someone so steady in a world that often felt chaotic. The weeks continued, each day building on the last. She watched him interact with others, always patient, always considerate. He helped a neighbor repair a broken fence, guided a lost calf back to its mother, and even took time to teach a young boy how to properly care for his horse. Every small act reinforced what she was beginning to realize. Trust wasn't about labels, assumptions, or appearances. It was about consistent actions, about showing up when it mattered most. And then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. She received news that her family back home was facing a serious crisis. Panic rose in her chest. She felt helpless, far from home, and overwhelmed by a sense of urgency. Her first instinct was to manage it on her own, but the thought of traveling in her current state and handling everything alone terrified her. Without hesitation, he appeared. He offered practical help, rides to the nearest town, advice on how to contact family quickly, and emotional support without being overbearing. He listened as she spoke, never interrupting, never judging. His presence was steady, a calming force that allowed her to think clearly and take action. By the time the day ended, she realized something important. He had become more than a kind neighbor or a helpful presence. He was a pillar she could lean on in moments of fear, someone she could trust implicitly when circumstances were beyond her control. And with that realization came something else, a sense of emotional connection she had not allowed herself to feel in years. That night, as she lay in bed reflecting on the events, she understood a deeper truth. Trust, once broken or withheld, could be rebuilt, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. It wasn't about avoiding risk or keeping one's heart guarded at all times. It was about recognizing those rare moments and rare people who proved themselves worthy of that trust. And in this cowboy, she had found that proof. Her heart was not completely unguarded, but it had started to open in a way she hadn't thought possible. She realized that vulnerability did not always mean weakness. Sometimes, it meant the courage to accept help, to believe in someone else, and to allow herself to feel deeply again. And as she drifted to sleep, she could not deny it any longer. The man who had quietly and consistently shown care, respect, and reliability had begun to earn her trust in a way that was undeniable. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope, not just for safety, not just for comfort, but for something deeper, something real. She knew the journey was far from over. Trust was fragile and feelings were complicated. But she also knew that he had proven, beyond doubt, that he was someone she could count on. And in a world that often felt unpredictable and harsh, that realization was more valuable than anything she had expected to find. From that moment onward, she began to notice a quiet shift in her own heart. She smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and allowed herself to enjoy moments she might have previously dismissed. She began to see life in the small town not as temporary, but as a place where connections could form, where trust could be built, and where love, even cautious, careful love, could grow. And she knew deep down that this cowboy, steady, kind, and unexpectedly reliable, was at the center of that change, quietly saving her heart in ways she had never imagined, and teaching her that not all warnings are true, and not all people fit the stories told about them. Time seemed to move differently in the small town now. The days were full of work, small routines, and quiet moments that had begun to feel more meaningful than she had expected. She had started to settle into the rhythm of the place, but it was not just the routines that kept her busy. It was the presence of the cowboy, steady and reliable, who had become a constant in her life. She no longer tried to avoid noticing him, and she realized slowly that she wanted to. Trust had grown between them, built quietly and patiently through small acts, moments of care and consistent presence. But trust was not the same as closeness, and she still hesitated to allow herself to feel fully. Her heart had been hurt before, and she had spent years protecting it. Letting someone in completely was terrifying. And yet every time she saw him, every time he showed up to help or simply shared a quiet moment, a small part of her let go of fear. One afternoon, she found herself stuck on a task that seemed impossible. She had been trying to organize some files and paperwork for her job, but everything was scattered, confusing, and overwhelming. She sighed in frustration, feeling the familiar stress of wanting to control everything, yet being unable to manage it all. Before she could even think about asking for help, the door opened and he walked in. "Need some help?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. She shook her head quickly. "No, I can manage." But he didn't leave. Instead, he quietly came closer, glanced at the papers, and said, "Sometimes it's easier to sort things together. Two people can do it faster." She hesitated but finally nodded, realizing that accepting help did not make her weak, it made her smart. Together, they worked in silence for a while, occasionally exchanging words, laughing softly at a small mistake, or sharing observations about the task. The tension she had felt alone began to fade, replaced by a quiet comfort. By the time they finished, the piles were organized, the work completed, and she felt a sense of relief that went beyond the task itself. It was more than just having help with work. It was having someone she could rely on, someone whose presence eased her stress and brought calm to situations that normally overwhelmed her. Days passed, and with each one, she allowed herself to notice him more. The way he carried himself, calm yet purposeful, inspired confidence. The way he treated others with patience and respect showed her what genuine care looked like. And the way he consistently respected her boundaries, never rushing or forcing closeness, made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. One evening, they found themselves walking together after finishing chores in the fields. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold, and the air smelled of earth and rain from earlier in the day. Silence stretched comfortably between them, filled not with awkwardness but with understanding. "You've changed a lot since you came here," he said quietly. She glanced at him, curious. "Changed?" "Yes," he replied, smiling softly. "You used to be tense, careful, distant, but now I see more ease in your steps, more light in your eyes. You're learning to let life happen instead of trying to control everything." She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she could not fully explain. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of holding on to all the walls I built." He nodded, understanding. "Walls protect us, yes, but they also keep out the people who can help us grow, who can be there when it matters." Her chest tightened. She realized he was right. She had spent years protecting herself, and in doing so she had missed moments like these, the quiet companionship, the small joys, the comfort of someone reliable. She wanted that now, more than she had expected, but fear still whispered in her mind. Fear of being hurt, fear of trusting too much. It was during this period of quiet reflection that something unexpected happened. She received news from back home. Her younger sibling had been in an accident. The panic that rose in her chest was immediate. She felt helpless, far from home, and overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. Her first instinct was to handle it alone, to find a way to fix everything without involving anyone else. But deep down, she knew that was impossible. Before she could even gather her thoughts, he appeared. He had sensed her distress, or perhaps he had simply noticed her change in demeanor. Without hesitation, he offered support, practical help, advice, and presence. He helped her make phone calls, guided her on travel options, and stayed beside her as she processed the news. He did not pressure her to feel a certain way, nor did he make assumptions. He simply was there, a steady presence in a moment of chaos. Through the hours that followed, she realized something profound. Trust was not just about comfort or companionship. It was about having someone who showed up when life became difficult, someone whose presence allowed her to face fear and uncertainty without collapsing. And in him, she had found that. As the days continued, her ankle healed completely, and she returned to her normal activities. Yet the bond between them had deepened in ways neither could ignore. She began to feel a quiet longing when he was not around, a subtle awareness that his presence had become part of her sense of security. She noticed the small ways he thought of others, how he anticipated needs before they were spoken, and how his calm demeanor seemed to steady the world around him. One evening, she watched him interact with a neighbor who had injured their horse. He moved patiently, guiding the animal, speaking softly, never showing frustration or haste. She noticed how the neighbor looked at him with gratitude and trust, and she realized that the trust others placed in him was mirrored in her own heart. She admired him deeply, not for grand gestures or dramatic heroics, but for the quiet consistency and care he showed in every action. Slowly, she began to allow herself to share more with him, not deep secrets, but small thoughts and feelings she had kept to herself. She spoke about her childhood, her fears, and her experiences with disappointment. He listened, never judging, never interrupting, offering support through understanding rather than words alone. And with each conversation, her heart opened a little more. It was during one of these conversations that she realized the depth of her feelings. They were sitting on a quiet fence after a long day, the sun setting behind the hills. She felt a sense of peace she had not known in years, a feeling that perhaps this town and this cowboy were more than temporary. "You've taught me something important," she said softly. He looked at her, curious. "What's that?" "That trust, it's not about what people say. It's about actions, about being there when it matters. And you've shown me that in every little thing you do." He nodded slowly, a gentle smile on his lips. "I'm glad you see that. Not everyone does, and it takes courage to let someone in after being hurt." Her chest tightened at his words. Courage, it was not something she had always felt she possessed, but in him she found the strength to let go of fear, to open her heart slowly, cautiously, yet genuinely. Over the following weeks, their connection deepened further. They shared quiet moments, walking along fields, watching sunsets, laughing at small mistakes, and simply being present for one another. Each day built on the last, creating a foundation of trust, understanding, and subtle affection. She began to notice that she no longer felt complete fear or hesitation in his presence. Instead, she felt warmth, comfort, and an awareness that he could be counted on in ways she had rarely experienced before. She started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to trust again, to allow herself to feel, and to accept the care of someone who had earned it. One evening, as they watched the stars emerge in the clear night sky, she realized something profound. Trust, once broken or withheld, could grow in the smallest of ways, through kindness, patience, and consistent care. And love, even cautious and careful, could follow that trust naturally, like a river finding its path through quiet valleys. She knew the journey was not complete. Fear and caution were still parts of her, and life was unpredictable. But for the first time, she felt a sense of hope, a quiet, steady hope, that perhaps she had found someone who could be more than a temporary presence, someone who could hold a place in her heart for the long term. And as she looked at him, steady and reliable, a gentle smile tugging at his lips, she understood something deeply true. The heart could heal, trust could grow, and sometimes the person you least expect, someone who quietly proves themselves every day, can become the center of your world, teaching you that real care and connection exist, even in a world full of uncertainty. Time had a way of moving differently when she was with him. Days that once felt ordinary now carried a quiet significance. Every moment spent together, every shared glance or word, added a layer of trust and understanding that neither of them had rushed, yet both felt deeply. She had learned, slowly and carefully, to let go of fear, to allow her heart to notice and respond. She realized that trust and love did not always come with fireworks or dramatic declarations. They could grow quietly, persistently, in the small acts that truly mattered. The turning point came one late afternoon. She had been working on a community project, helping to organize supplies for a local event. It was a task that required patience and attention to detail, and she had been focused entirely on it. As she moved boxes and arranged items, A sudden collapse of one of the heavier stacks sent everything tumbling. She jumped back instinctively, and in the chaos, a box nearly fell on her foot. Before she could react, he appeared, steady and quick, lifting the box with ease and making sure she was safe. "You're going to have to stop carrying everything yourself," he said with a small grin, brushing the dust off his hands. She laughed softly, feeling relief wash over her. "I'm trying, I really am," she said, shaking her head. He smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her chest flutter. "I know you are, but there's no harm in letting someone help." It was in that moment she realized something profoundly true. She had spent so much of her life believing that strength meant doing everything alone, that vulnerability was dangerous. But the truth was different. Strength could also mean allowing someone else in, letting them share the burden, and trusting them to stand beside you when life became difficult. Over the next few weeks, their connection grew even stronger. They shared quiet evenings, simple meals, and walks across the open fields that had become so familiar. Each interaction, each conversation, was a small thread weaving them closer together. She found herself smiling more easily, laughing without restraint, and feeling a comfort she had long thought impossible. And slowly, she began to admit something to herself she had not dared to before. She was falling in love. It was not a sudden, dramatic realization, but a quiet awareness that grew each day. She noticed how her heart leapt when he appeared, how her thoughts lingered on him when he was gone, and how even the smallest gestures, a helping hand, a patient smile, a word of encouragement, mattered more than she had expected. Love, she discovered, was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and built through trust. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in gold and pink, they sat together on a small wooden fence overlooking the fields. The air was warm, carrying the scent of earth and grass, and the world felt peaceful in a way it had never felt before. "I never thought I could feel this way," she said quietly, glancing at him. He looked at her, curious. "Feel this way?" "Yes," she said, her voice soft. "Safe, cared for, happy. I never believed it was possible." He smiled, a gentle warmth in his expression. "You've always deserved to feel that way. Sometimes it just takes the right person to show you it's possible." Her heart skipped a beat. She realized that right here, in this quiet town, she had found that person. Someone who had proven, day after day, that he could be trusted, that he could care deeply, and that he could stand by her in every way that mattered. The next few days were filled with a sense of anticipation she could not ignore. She found herself thinking of him constantly, noticing the little things, how his eyes softened when he smiled, how his hands moved with careful precision, how his presence brought a sense of calm that no words could describe. She began to understand something deeply important. Love was not just about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about consistency, care, and the willingness to stand together through both ordinary and challenging moments. Then came a moment that tested everything they had built. A sudden storm swept across the town, fierce and unrelenting. Winds howled, rain poured in torrents, and the streets became difficult to navigate. She was caught in the middle of it, trying to secure supplies for the event she had been organizing. Fear surged as she realized the storm was stronger than she had anticipated, and she struggled to keep her balance on the slippery ground. And then he appeared. Without hesitation, he moved through the storm with confidence and calm, reaching her quickly. He guided her to safety, protecting her from the wind and rain with his coat, steadying her every step. The storm raged around them, but in that moment she felt an overwhelming sense of security and trust. "You're going to be okay," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "I've got you." She held onto his arm, feeling her fears melt away. In that instant, she realized something powerful. Trust had blossomed fully in her heart. She no longer questioned whether she could rely on him. She no longer hesitated to allow herself to feel deeply. He had proven himself beyond doubt, and now there was nothing holding her back. When the storm passed, they walked back to her apartment together, wet but unharmed. The sky cleared, leaving behind a brilliant rainbow stretching across the horizon. She looked at him, her heart full, and smiled. "You saved me," she said softly. He shook his head, smiling gently. "We saved each other in a way." Her chest tightened at his words. She realized that love and trust were not about one person rescuing another. They were about standing together, supporting each other, and building something real through shared moments, both small and significant. In the following days, she allowed herself to fully embrace the connection they had formed. She shared more of her thoughts, hopes, and dreams, and he listened with care, never judging or dismissing her feelings. They laughed, worked together, and spent quiet evenings simply enjoying each other's presence. Each day reinforced the bond between them, showing her that love could be patient, gentle, and enduring. Finally, one evening, as they watched the sun dip below the hills, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, she realized something undeniable. Her heart had chosen its truth. She no longer feared trusting him. She no longer questioned whether he could be relied upon. She knew, with certainty, that he had become the person she wanted to stand by, the person she could count on in every way that mattered. Turning to him, she took a deep breath. "I trust you," she said softly, her voice steady, "completely." He looked at her, a mixture of warmth and relief in his eyes. "And I trust you," he replied, "always." In that moment, the walls she had built around her heart crumbled completely. Years of caution, fear, and hesitation melted away, leaving only clarity and certainty. She understood something profoundly simple yet beautiful. Love was not about avoiding risk or guarding oneself against pain. It was about recognizing the person who proves themselves day after day, and allowing your heart to follow its own truth. From that day forward, life in the small town felt fuller, richer, and brighter. She and the cowboy continued to share their days, learning more about each other, supporting one another, and enjoying the quiet joys that life offered. Their connection was not built on dramatic gestures or fleeting emotions. It was built on consistency, care, and trust. And in that connection, she found something she had long thought impossible, a love that felt safe, real, and enduring. As the months passed, she realized that the warnings she had carried all her life were only stories, shadows of truth shaped by fear and assumption. Not every cowboy was reckless or untrustworthy. Some, like him, could be anchors in a world that often felt uncertain, guiding hearts gently toward hope and love. And so, with the sun setting behind them and the field stretching wide before their eyes, she understood something completely. Her heart had chosen its own path. It had chosen the person who had quietly proven himself worthy, who had stood by her when she needed him, and who had shown her that trust and love could coexist in a world that often demanded caution. Her heart at last belonged to him, and she knew without a doubt that it always would. From that moment on, life was no longer about temporary stays, fleeting encounters, or fear of disappointment. It was about trust earned, care given, and love chosen. And in that quiet, steady love, she found a home she had never expected, but one she would cherish forever.